There is one reality in life, and that is death. It is the great equalizer. The rest is a distraction. What have you done to prepare for it? Do you really know where you have come from and to where you are really going? To all who come to see and hear of this documentary, let it be known that our fight is not with any group of people. Our fight is with Satan himself, who has successfully deceived the world into going astray. For it has become ever so evident that most people have no clue not only of who is God, but also who is Satan. This message of truth is a final warning to all people, to the Jewish, the Christian, the Muslim, the Hindu, the Buddhist, and even to the atheist. This is a final warning to all of humanity. If you are like most people in the world, who refuse to search and examine the truth of their religion from the very own scriptures with a clear mind, then I strongly urge you to turn away now. For this presentation is clearly not for you. It is those with the courage to accept the truth, who have the wisdom and understanding to question the clergy. You will embark on new understanding to the Torah, Gospel, and Quran, which has never been revealed before in the history of humanity, which amazingly matches the true prophecies of Enoch and Idris, and seriously exposes the false teachings of the clergy and the scholars. It is those whose names have been written in the book of life before the creation of the world that will come to accept and believe this message.
About Abraham. What we are about to produce will cement our claim that the times, names and events of our world have been heavily corrupted by the devil and his servants to deceive mankind. When one reads the text of Genesis 10 verse 25, 2 sons were born to Heber. One was named Peleg because in his time the earth was divided. His brother was named Yoktan. When we read the above verse, we are informed that in the time of Peleg, the earth was divided. Yet when we cross-examine the same text with Joshua 7 verse 19, where the writings of Genesis 10 and 11 were originally derived from, we discover the damning truth that in the days of Peleg, the sons of men were divided, and clearly not the earth. Joshua 7 verse 19. These are the generations of Shem. Shem begat Arphaxad, and Arphaxad begat Shalak. And Shalak begot Eber, and Eber were born 2 children. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days the sons of men were divided, and in the latter days the earth was divided. It has become clearer that the motive behind the above deceit of Genesis 10 verse 25, which was further consolidated in Genesis 11 verses 10 to 26, from Shem to Abraham, is to conceal the damning truth that Abraham and Nimrod existed in the same era, as can be clearly defined from the damning text of Joshua 7 39 to 41. And when Nimrod had joyfully returned from battle, after having conquered his enemies, all his brethren, together with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them, and they placed the regal crown upon his head. And he set over his subjects and people, princes, judges, and rulers, as is the custom amongst kings. And he placed Terah, whom we all know is the father of Abraham in the Torah. And he placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his host, and he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. What we discover from the above verse is that Terah, the father of Abraham, was elevated above all the princes of Nimrod, as it is clear from the following damning evidence of Joshua 7 50 to 51. And Terah took a wife, and her name was Amtelo, the daughter of Cornebo. And the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. Terah was 70 years old when he begat him, and Terah called the name of his son that was born to him Abram, because the king had raised him in those days and dignified him above all his princes that were with him. Joshua 9, 13-14. And Abram saw the sun shining upon the earth, and Abram said unto himself, Surely now this sun that shines upon the earth is God, and him I will serve. And Abraham served the sun in that day, and he prayed to him. And when evening came, the sun set as usual. And Abraham said within himself, Surely this cannot be God. And when he saw the sun rising, he cried, This is my Lord, this is greater. But when the sun set, he said, O my people, surely I am free from that which you associate with God. Verily I have turned my face towards him, who has created the heavens and the earth, away from idolatry, and I am not of those who associate others with God. Joshua 9, verse 17. And Abraham saw the stars and moon before him, and he said, Surely this is the God who created the whole earth, as well as man. And behold, these his servants are gods around him. And Abraham served the moon and prayed to it all that night. Quran 6, verse 77. And when he saw the moon rising up, he exclaimed, This is my Lord. But when it set, he said, Unless my Lord guides me, I surely shall become one of the folk who are astray. Once again, it is the following damning Jewish testimonies that provide us with the damning evidence that has clearly been omitted from the Torah that Abraham lived in the same era as that of Nimrod. Evil Nimrod versus the righteous Abraham. Abraham sacrificing his son, Ishmael. Abraham cast into the fire by Nimrod. We can see from the first 4 words in the above text the truth we clearly produced in the previous documentary, beyond reasonable doubt, that Abraham sacrificed his son Ishmael and not Isaac, as falsely inscribed in the Torah. The Bible does not mention any meeting between Nimrod and Abraham, although a confrontation between the two is said to have taken place according to several Jewish and Islamic traditions. Some stories bring them both together in a cataclysmic collision, seen as the symbol of the confrontation between good and evil, and was a symbol of monotheism against polytheism. On the other hand, some Jewish traditions say only that the two men met and had a discussion. According to K. van der Toorn, P.W. van der Horst, this tradition is first attested to in the writings of Pseudo-Philo. The story is also found in the Talmud and in rabbinical writings in the Middle Ages. In some versions, as in Flavius Josephus, Nimrod is a man who sets his will against that of God. In others, he proclaims himself a god and is worshipped as such by his subjects. Sometimes with his consort, Semiramis, worshipped as a goddess at his side. A portent in the stars tells Nimrod and his astrologers of the impending birth of Abraham, who would put an end to idolatry. Nimrod therefore orders the killing of all newborn babies. However, Abraham's mother escapes from the fields and gives birth secretly. At a young age, Abraham recognizes God and starts worshipping him. He confronts Nimrod and tells him face to face to cease idolatry, whereupon Nimrod orders him burnt at the stake. In some versions, Nimrod has his subject gather wood for 4 whole years, so as to burn Abraham in the biggest bonfire the world had ever seen. Yet when the fire is lit, Abraham walks out unscathed. The above story, my dear brothers and sisters, that Abraham is to burn in the biggest bonfire the world had ever seen, is further attested to in the book of Joshua, chapter 12. And all the king's servants, princesses, lords, governors and judges, and all the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Abraham. And all the women and little ones crowded upon the roofs and towers to see what was doing with Abraham. And they all stood together at a distance, and there was not a man left that did not come on that day to behold the scene. And when Abraham was come, the conjurers of the king and the sages saw Abraham, and they cried out to the king, Our sovereign Lord, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars, which we declared to the king now 50 years since. And the king's servants took Abraham and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, excepting their lower garments which were upon them. And they bound their hands and feet with linen cords, and the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the furnace. And the Lord loved Abraham, and he had compassion over him. And the Lord came down and delivered Abraham from the fire, and he was not burnt. But all the cords with which they bound him were burnt, while Abraham remained and walked about in the fire. And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burnt to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with the Lord. And those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them, and they were burnt, and 12 men of them died. It is not till we cross-examine the above information with the transparent testimony of our teacher Jesus in the Gospel of Barnabas that we come to grasp the real truth of the story. In chapters 27 and 28, Barnabas, Then said Philip, O Master, how came it pass that Abraham's father wished to burn his son? Jesus answered, One day, Abraham having come to the age of 12 years, his father said to him, Tomorrow is the festival of all the gods. Therefore we shall go to the great temple and bear a present to my God, great Baal. And thou shalt choose for thyself a god, for thou art of age to have a god. Abraham answered with God, Willingly, O my father. And so betimes in the morning they went before everyone else to the temple. But Abraham bare beneath his tunic an axe hidden, whereupon having entered into the temple, as the crowd increased, Abraham hid himself behind an idol in a dark part of the temple. His father, when he departed, believed that Abraham had gone home before him, wherefore he did not stay to seek him. When everyone had departed from the temple, the priest closed the temple and went away. Then Abraham took the axe and cut off the feet of all the idols, except the great god of Baal. At its feet he placed the axe amid the ruins which the statues made, for they, through being old and composed of pieces, fell in pieces. When we cross-reference with the book of Jasher in chapter 11, we surprisingly find the similarities. And when Abraham saw all these things, his anger was kindled against his father. And he hastened and took a hatchet in his hand and came into the chamber of the gods, and he broke all his father's gods. And when he had done breaking the images, he placed the hatchet in the hand of the great God, which was there before them, and he went out. Moving on from Barnabas, chapter 28. Thereupon Abraham, going forth from the temple, was seen by certain men who suspected him of having gone to thieve something from the temple. So they laid hold on him, and having arrived at the temple, when they saw their God so broken in pieces, they cried out with lamentation, Come quickly, O men, and let us slay him who hath slain our gods. There ran together there about 10,000 men with the priests, and questioned Abraham of the reason why he had destroyed their gods. Abraham answered, Ye are foolish. Shall then a man slay God? It is the great God that hath slain them. See you not the axe which he has near his feet? Certain it is that he desireth no fellows. Then arrived there the father of Abraham, who, mindful of the many discourses of Abraham against their gods, and recognizing the axe wherewith Abraham had broken in pieces the idols, cried out, It hath been this traitor of a son of mine, who hath slain our gods, for this axe is mine. And he recounted to them all that had passed between him and his son. Accordingly, the man collected a great quantity of wood, and having bound Abraham's hands and feet, put him upon the wood, and put fire underneath. Lo, God, through his angel, commanded the fire that it should not burn Abraham, his servant. The fire blazed up with great fury, and burnt about 2,000 men of those who had condemned Abraham to death. Have a close listen to the last sentence, my dear brothers and sisters. And burnt about 2,000 men of those who had condemned Abraham to death. This includes the father of Abraham, my dear brothers and sisters. Abraham verily found himself free, being carried by the angel of God near to the house of his father. Without seeing, he carried him, and thus Abraham escaped death. All of the above is further attested to in Surah 6, 74 to 83. And mention, O Muhammad, when Abraham said to his father Azar, Do you take idols as deities? Indeed, I see you and your people to be in manifest error. And his people argued with him. He said, Do you argue with me concerning Allah, while he has guided me? And I fear not what you associate with him, and will not be harmed, unless my Lord should will something. My Lord encompasses all things in knowledge. Then will you not remember? Surah 37, 83 to 96. Abraham was on the self-same way as Noah when he came to his Lord with a pure heart, and said to his father and his people, Whom do you worship? Is it false deities that you want to serve rather than Allah? What do you think of the Lord of the whole universe? Then he looked carefully at the stars and said, I am sick. So turning their backs, they went away from him. Then he went quietly to the temple of the deities and said, What is the matter with you? Why do you not eat? What is the matter with you? Why do you not speak? Then he turned upon them, striking them with his right hand, whereupon people came to him running. Abraham said to them, Do you worship what you yourselves have carved with your own hands, while it is Allah who has created you and all that you make? Surah 2, 258. Have you not considered the one who argued with Abraham about his Lord, merely because Allah had given him kingship? When Abraham said, My Lord is the one who gives life and causes death, he said, I give life and cause death. Abraham said, Indeed, Allah brings up the sun from the east, so bring it up from the west. So the disbeliever was overwhelmed by astonishment, and Allah does not guide the wrongdoing people. Surah 37, 97 to 98. They spoke amongst themselves, Build him a pyre, and then throw him into the furnace. They had contrived an evil plan against him, but we abased them all. It is crystal clear from the testimony of Jesus, my dear brothers and sisters, where he said, Lo, God, through his angel, commanded the fire that it should not burn Abraham, his servant. The fire blazed up with great fury and burnt about 2,000 men, including those who have condemned Abraham to death. And it is clear from the damning confirmation of the Quran They had contrived an evil plan against him, but we obeyed them all. It is crystal clear, my dear brothers and sisters, from the testimony of Jesus we have just read, and from the damning confirmation of the Quran, that Nimrod, his wife and family, the same family that was mentioned in the following testimony, along with the father of Abraham and some 2,000 men, perished in the blaze they had prepared for Abraham. This could well be the reason why Abraham, who was 12 at the time, lived with Noah and Shem in Jasher 9 verse 6. And Abraham was in Noah's house 39 years. And Abraham knew the Lord from 3 years old. And he went in the ways of the Lord until the day of his death, as Noah and his son Shem had taught him. And all the sons of the earth in those days greatly transgressed against the Lord, and they rebelled against him. And they served other gods, and they forgot the Lord who had created them in the earth. And the inhabitants of the earth made unto themselves at that time every man his god, gods of wood and stone, which could neither speak, hear, nor deliver. And the sons of men served them, and they became their gods. All of the above evidence of our only teacher in the Gospel of Barnabas and the Quran is in complete contrast to the distortion of history in the following. Text of Midrash, Rabbah version. The following version of the Abraham versus Nimrod confrontation appears in the Midrash Rabbah, a major compilation of Jewish scriptural exegesis. The part relating to Genesis in which this appears, chapter 38:13, is considered to date from the 6th century. He, Abraham, was given over to Nimrod, told him, "Worship the fire." Abraham said to him, "Shall I then worship the water which puts off the fire?" Nimrod told him, "Worship the water." Abraham said to him, "If so, shall I worship the cloud which carries the water?" Nimrod told him, "Worship the cloud." Abraham said to him, "If so, shall I worship the wind which scatters the clouds?" Nimrod said to him, "Worship the wind." Abraham said to him, "And shall we worship the human who withstands the wind?" Said Nimrod to him, "You pile words upon words. I bow to none but the fire in it. Shall I throw you, and let the God to whom you bow come and save you from it?" Haran, Abraham's brother, was standing there. He said to himself, "What shall I do if Abraham wins? I shall say, I am of Abraham's followers. If Nimrod wins, I shall say, I am of Nimrod's followers." When Abraham went into the furnace and survived, Haran was asked, "Whose follower are you?" And he answered, "I am Abraham's." Then they took him and threw him into the furnace, and his belly opened, and he died, and he predeceased Terach, his father. Perki di Rabbi Elazar, c. 833, relates to Jewish traditions that Nimrod inherited the garments of Adam and Eve from his father Cush, and that these made him invisible. Nimrod's party then defeated the Japhethites to assume universal rulership. Later, Esau, grandson of Abraham, ambushed, beheaded, and robbed Nimrod. In some versions, Nimrod then challenges Abraham to battle. When Nimrod appears at the head of enormous armies, Abraham produces an army of gnats, which destroys Nimrod's army. Some accounts of a gnat or mosquito enter Nimrod's brain and drive him out of his mind. A divine retribution which Jewish tradition also assigned to the Roman Emperor Titus, destroyer of the temple in Jerusalem. All of the above deceit, my dear brothers and sisters, brings to fruition the prophecy of Jesus in John 8:44. You belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Chapter 189, Barnabas. As God lives, in his presence my soul stands. If the book of Moses with the book of our father David had not been corrupted by the human traditions of false Pharisees and doctors, God would not have given his word to me. And why I speak of the book of Moses and the book of David, every prophecy have they corrupted in so much that today a thing is not sought because God has commanded it. But men look whether the doctors say it, and the Pharisees observe it, as though God were in error and men could not err. What is of notable interest, my dear brothers and sisters, is the name of Abraham's father, which appears as Azar in the Quran, in complete contrast to the planted deceit of Genesis 11, verse 26. After Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Having arrived at this truth, it is from here on that the story takes a sinister twist. It is from here on that Satan plays a pivotal role in order to deceive a lost world. It is from this point that Satan begins to chain up mankind. In order to understand this wicked role, one has to go back in time to fully understand the deep meaning to the words that were spoken between God and his angels, and between God and Satan. It is until we retrace our steps back to the dialogue that took place in the heavens between God and his angels in the following verse that we begin to fully understand the true meaning to the following. And mention, O Muhammad, when your Lord said to the angels, indeed I will make upon the earth a successive authority. They said, will you place upon it one who causes corruption therein and sheds blood, while we declare your praise and sanctify you? Allah said, indeed I know that which you do not know. When we deeply examine the beginning of this pivotal and powerful verse, and mention, O Muhammad, when your Lord said to the angels, indeed I will make upon the earth a successive authority, one can clearly ascertain that God was clearly referring to the fact that the earth will be ruled by the righteous Adam and his righteous seed, that would be created to worship him alone as the sovereign God and Creator, of whom was Noah and Abraham. It is the next damning text where the angels replied. They said, will you place upon it one who causes corruption therein and sheds blood, while we declare your praise and sanctify you? Allah said, indeed I know that which you do not know. It is in this very text that one can ascertain God clearly knew that Satan, who was expelled from the heavens as a jinn with his hosts, who had deceived Adam and Eve some 13 times, as well as their seed before the flood, of whom was Cain, who murdered his brother in cold blood, was going to place his own authority on earth after the flood to fight his will. It is from this eternal oath of deception that Satan proudly promised from the very beginning. In chapter 7, verses 16 to 17. Because you have put me in error, I will surely sit in wait for them on your straight path. Then I will come to them from before them and from behind them, and on their right and on their left, and you will not find most of them grateful to you. Along with the consent he had obtained from God to send people astray, in chapter 17:64, and incite senselessness, whoever you can among them with your voice, and assault them with your horses and foot soldiers, and become a partner in their wealth and their children, and promise them. But Satan does not promise them except delusion. It is with the above verses that we arm ourselves with the knowledge that will empower us to fight the forthcoming deceit of Satan and his unit. It is from the above platform that we launch our attack to expose Satan and his servants, using other like-minded sources to help deliver this critical and dire message in full, so that no one can have any excuse for ignorancy. The following information is about the deceit that has continued after Nimrod's death, as defined earlier. The priceless knowledge we have gained along this amazing journey about how Satan and his jinn can appear as beautiful maidens, as beautiful men, and as beautiful children, along with the origins of the triple deities, will hold us in good stead in identifying the coming deception. What happens next is a clever trick by Satan to deceive the world. The following information of how the wife of Nimrod was also his mother, who married him, is a form of sorcery by the evil jinn that has formed the basis for some very wicked organizations of today, most notably that of the Mormons, who believe Satan sent his own son and daughter, who married each other, into the world to take back control.
The legacy of Nimrod, the sun god Baal. Nimrod worshipped the pagan sun god named Moloch. The title, Great Hunter before in the face of Yahweh, was ascribed to him because he literally hunted human beings to murder as sacrifices to his pagan god. In the book of Jasher, which is mentioned in the Bible in Joshua 10 verse 13 and in 2 Samuel 1 verse 18, we learn that Nimrod received instruction from the priest of Molech to marry his mother in an act of incest in order to acquire the third eye, or the all-seeing eye, the exact same knowledge sought by those today who call themselves the Illuminati, or illuminated ones. Nimrod, the king, took a wife. The wife Nimrod chose was his own mother, so the son became both the husband and son of the mother, in effect making this marriage a trinity union, inasmuch as the husband was the same person as the son, united as one with the wife mother. She then gave birth to a son named Tammuz, whom she claimed was the reincarnation of Nimrod. So through the belief that Tammuz was Nimrod in the flesh, the queen was able to subdue the people of Babylon. So Tammuz was Nimrod in the flesh and one with his father, who was one with his wife mother through marriage. The unholy concept of a trinity is born. Religion of Semiramis, the moon goddess Ishtar. Nimrod was killed by his enemies and his body parts distributed all over his kingdom. Semiramis attempted to gather the body parts of Nimrod and accomplished retrieving all parts of his dismembered body except his private parts. It was from the private parts of Nimrod that Semiramis created the fertility religion known as the mystery religion of Babylon. These private parts remembered by the construction of obelisks. After the death of her son husband, King Nimrod, Semiramis began to formulate what we now know as the mystery religion of Babylon. In her new religion, she proclaimed that Nimrod had defeated death and elevated himself above all that is called God and literally became the sun. She instituted a day of worship dedicated to the sun that even today we call Sun Day, or Dies Solis, Day of the Sun, which later replaced the Day of Rest. the seventh-day Sabbath by order of the sun-worshipping Emperor Constantine. Semiramis, being the mother of Nimrod in addition to his queen, then elevated herself up as the mother of God and queen of heaven. Semiramis later became pregnant, not wanting to destroy the image of her as the queen mother of God. She declared that Nimrod, the sun god, now called Baal, later known as Zeus by the Greeks, and then just God by Christianity, had impregnated her through the rays of the sun. She had given a virgin birth to her new son named Tammuz, who she claimed was the reincarnated Nimrod and the son of God. So Tammuz was believed to be the sun god Baal, Nimrod, in the flesh and at the same time the son of God. The two, Semiramis and Tammuz, became worshipped as what we now know as Madonna and Child, and then later Mary, Jesus, as all the idols were simply renamed by different cultures across the centuries.
It is about Semiramis and Nimrod that Jesus prophesied in Revelation 17. Babylon, the prostitute on the beast, one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute, who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come." This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads, the 7 hills on which the woman sits, they are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, one is, the other has not yet to come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The beast who once was, and now is not, is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. Beware of this last sentence, brothers and sisters. Only God is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen and faithful followers. Then the angel said to me, The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish His purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. You notice, my brothers and sisters, that this all ties in with Ezekiel 38 and 39 and the prophecies against Gog and Magog. What is more interesting than the above is that when we deeply look at the multiple names of Semiramis, we find out she is also known as the goddess Isis. The word Isis, my brothers and sisters, in Arabic translates to foundation, a very dark name that has been brought back into our world by her descendants to terrorize the world into fully submitting to Satan instead of the eternal God. How intriguing indeed. We find evil traces, my dear brothers and sisters, of Nimrod throughout the so-called New Testament that has been maliciously inserted into the sayings of blessed Jesus, most notably that of Luke 22:19. And he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And John 6:54. "Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day." What is more frightening and more damning is the next piece of evidence in the parable of the 10 minas. While they were listening to this, he went on to tell them a parable, because he was near Jerusalem, and the people thought that the kingdom of God was going to appear at once. He said, "A man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king, and then to return. So he called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas. 'Put this money to work,' he said, 'until I come back.' But his subjects hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, 'We don't want this man to be our king.' He was made king, however, and returned home. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money, in order to find out what they had gained with it. The first one came and said, 'Sir, your mina has earned 10 more.' 'Well done, my good servant,' his master replied, 'because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter. Take charge of 10 cities.' The second came and said, 'Sir, your mina has earned 5 more.' His master answered, 'You take charge of 5 cities.' Then another servant came and said, 'Sir, here is your mina. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. I was afraid of you because you are a hard man. You take out what you did not put in, and you reap what you did not sow.' His master replied, 'I will judge you by your own words, you wicked servant. You knew, did you, that I am a hard man, taking out what I did not put in, and reaping what I did not sow? Why then didn't you put my money on deposit so that when I came back, I could have collected it with interest? Then he said to those standing by, take his mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. Sir, they said, he already has 10. He replied, I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine, who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. The malicious deceit that has been planted into the mouth of Jesus is in complete contrast to John 6:15. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. We can now clearly comprehend why Nimrod wanted to avenge himself on God for wiping out his ancestors. As quoted earlier, Josephus wrote, now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He also said he would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. My dear brothers and sisters, we now arrive at the full and clear understanding that the fight between evil Nimrod and the righteous Abraham is the fight between Satan and God till the end of the world. This God of our world has been maliciously planted in Revelations 19 verse 16. On his robe and on his thigh he has this name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The evil conspiracy against God and his servants we have just unveiled in all of the above continues to prosper in our world today through the descendants of Nimrod and Sennacherib, who continue to control our governments today, as the damning testimonies of some very courageous and noble people strongly affirm in the following. John Todd, ex-Illuminati. Ted, ex-FBI boss. Here is another list of triple deities that Satan and his jinn has succeeded in deceiving mankind with. Once again, we can now ascertain that theology originated from Satan and his jinns that became gods in our world. It is to the above tragedy that God was alluding to in the commandment of Exodus 20. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below, You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents, to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Exodus 34:10-17. Then the Lord said, I am making a covenant with you. Before all your people I will do wonders never before done in any nation in all the world. The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. Obey what I command you today. I will drive out before you the Amorites, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they will be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other god, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land, for when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices. And when you choose some of their daughters as wives for your sons, and those daughters prostitute themselves to their gods, they will lead your sons to do the same. Do not make any idols. The religion of Abraham. By the end of this next section, we will all have a greater understanding to why Jesus called the false Pharisees, rabbis and scribes in John 8:44. You belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. From what we have learnt about Abraham so far, how he was born into a pagan family who worshipped other gods, it is easy to understand how he was chosen by God for his pure heart and love for him, as many of us lucky ones are today that are in the same situation as he was, as further defined in the following verse of the Quran, Surah 2:257. Allah is the ally of those who believe. He brings them out from darkness into the light, and those who disbelieve, their allies are Taghut. They take them out of the light into darkness. Those are the companions of the fire. They will abide eternally therein. Genesis 12, the call of Abraham. The Lord said to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. It is clear from the previous knowledge that Abraham survived the fire and his dad perished. And what we have just read, it is clear that God willed all the people of the earth to be blessed through Abraham, whom God took out of the darkness of his family and their gods into his light. For it was the will of God to create a one God, one faith world. God willed to renew the covenant he had made from the beginning of the world with Adam. In chapter 3, Forgotten Eden 1, in Abraham and his seed, after he had destroyed the world with the flood. Genesis 13, the Lord said to Abraham, after Lot had parted him, look around from where you are, to the north and to the south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So Abraham went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord. It was God's will from the beginning that Abraham and his offspring possess all the land of the earth and forever. It is imperative we all understand that God willed from the very beginning to give the land to all the children of Abraham and to their descendants without any favour or prejudice. The Lord's covenant with Abraham, chapter 15. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abraham said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abraham said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. It is clear from the very beginning that God wanted to establish his covenant in Abraham through the promise of his firstborn son. Genesis 15, 7 to 11. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. But Abraham said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abraham brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abraham drove them away. The above vague text, my dear brothers and sisters, is clarified for us in Surah 2, 260, and mentioned when Abraham said, My Lord, show me how you bring the dead to life. Allah said, Have you not believed? He said, Yes, but for my heart to be satisfied. Allah said, Take 4 birds and cut them into pieces, then put on each mountain a portion of them. Then call them. They will come to you swiftly, and know that Allah is exalted in might and might. As the sun was setting, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. God willed from the beginning that the sons of Israel become Egyptian slaves for 400 years. By the end of these presentations, everyone will have a crystal clear picture of who are the true sons of Israel. Genesis 15 to 21. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. God willed from the beginning that the Egyptians be punished. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizis, Kadmontes, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashtes, and Jebusites. God willed from the beginning Abraham's descendants take possession of not only the above land of his eternal enemies, but the entire earth, as he promised in Genesis 12, verse 3. Genesis 16. Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai his wife took her Egyptian slave, Hagar, and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. My dear brothers and sisters, from what we have just read, it was Sarah's idea to build a family through her Egyptian slave in Hagar. In fact, she instigated and consented to Abram marrying a second wife, in contradiction to the deceit we have been brought up to believe. So what happened to the one man, one wife? The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The above promise cements the covenant God made to Abraham back in Genesis 13, 14 to 16. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted him, look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Genesis 16 verse 11. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. The above proclamation by the angel of God about the advent of Ishmael, the firstborn son, in whom the covenant that was established with Abraham will be renewed, brings to fruition what God promised Abraham back in Genesis 15:4. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. The above damning evidence, my dear brothers and sisters, we have just produced lays to serious waste, now and forever, the deceitful claim that Isaac is the firstborn of Abraham, and that it was in him that the covenant was established. The above revelation is due to the guidance of the angel of the Lord Gabriel, the Holy Spirit, as our Master attested to in his Gospel, chapter 44. Thereupon said the disciples, O Master, it is thus written in the book of Moses that in Isaac was the promise made. Jesus answered with a groan, It is so written, but Moses wrote it not, nor Joshua, but rather our rabbis who fear not God. Verily I say unto you, that if you consider the words of the angel Gabriel, you shall discover the malice of our scribes and doctors. Take note of the hate and despise for Ishmael and for the will of God by the false scribes that maliciously insert the following corruption into the next verse of Genesis 16:12. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Despite the malicious corruption we have just read in this verse, the scribe has gifted us with a golden master key, which will prepare us for the embedded deceit that is yet to come. When we zoom in on the last line in the above verse, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers, we discover the epic truth that Ishmael will have multiple brothers, not just Isaac, as the world has been deceived into believing. Genesis 17 takes special note of the forthcoming deceit that is subtly camouflaged behind the heading of the chapter 17 and the first 9 verses in order to make us fall into the belief that the covenant was established in Isaac, not Abraham, nor Ishmael, as was proven earlier beyond reasonable doubt. The covenant of circumcision, chapter 17. When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless. Then I will make my covenant between me and you and will greatly increase your numbers. We all know by now from the proclamation of John 8:56 that it was Jesus that appeared to Abraham. The corrupted insertion of walk before me faithfully and blameless is in complete contrast to the truth where he was already blameless in Genesis 15 verse 6. Abraham believed the Lord and he credited it to him as righteousness. The malicious insertion of then I will make my covenant between me and you and will greatly increase your numbers is in complete contrast to the damning truth of Genesis 13 verses 14 to 16, where God had already established his covenant with Abraham. The Lord said to Abraham, after Lot had parted from him, look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. The tampered text of Genesis 17 verse 2, I will greatly increase your numbers, is in complete contrast to the damning truth God had already promised Abraham in Genesis 13, verse 16. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Genesis 17, 1-5. Abraham fell face down, and God said to him, "As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations." The above tempered text, which is in clear defiance to God and Abraham, is in complete contrast to the damning truth God had spoken through his angel back in Genesis 12, verses 2-3, where he promised Abraham the entire earth and the people in it will be blessed through him. Genesis 12. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Genesis 17, verses 6 and 8. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. The above corrupted text, where God is made to look like a liar, is in complete contrast to the damning truth where the whole earth was promised to Abraham in Genesis 13, verses 14-16, and Genesis 15, 18-21. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, "To your descendants I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Kadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites." The heading at the top of chapter 17, the covenant of circumcision, was cleverly removed from the following text of Genesis 17, 10-14. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. For the generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born in your household or bought with money from a foreigner. Those who are not your offspring, whether born in your household or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Genesis 17, 22-23. When he had finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. On that very day, Abraham took his son Ishmael and all those born in his household or bought with his money, every male in his household, and circumcised them, as God told him. When we closely analyse the above text, my dear brothers and sisters, we come to the crystal clear understanding that Abraham received the covenant of circumcision from Jesus in person, as Jesus later proclaimed with conviction to the false Pharisees in John 8:56. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. We come to the crystal clear understanding that Abraham carried out the covenant of circumcision on the same day he received it from Jesus. We come to the clear understanding from the beginning of verse 23 that Ishmael was still a baby. I repeat, Ishmael was still a baby when he was circumcised, along with all the babies who were born in Abraham's household. And we come to the clear understanding that Abraham, along with every male of his household, was circumcised on that same day as Jesus had instructed him. From the damning evidence we have just produced, it is beyond reasonable doubt that Ishmael was still a newborn when he was circumcised. And it is beyond reasonable doubt that Abraham was still 86 years old when he was circumcised, as the verse of Genesis 16, verse 16 confirms. Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. In complete contrast to the malicious deceit planted in the beginning of this chapter, Genesis 17:1. When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless. And in the very next verse of Genesis 17:24, Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and his son Ishmael was 13. The deceit we have just exposed, my dear brothers and sisters, is not only a clear act of defiance and hatred by the false Pharisees, rabbis and scribes towards the will of God, towards Abraham, Ishmael, their offspring, and all their descendants, but is part of a wicked and sinister conspiracy to conceal an epic truth that has been concealed from the world, especially its Jews and Christians, till this day. This dark secret is about to come to light for those souls who do not cancel their minds, who have eyes and see, who have ears and listen. When we closely analyze the following text of Genesis 17:15 and the first half of verse 16, which reads as, God also said to Abraham, as for Sarai your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai, her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. We can clearly ascertain that Jesus also delivered a promise of a second son to Abraham. Only this time it is clearly through Sarah, whose name is to be Isaac, as revealed in the first half of the verse in Genesis 17:19. Then God said, yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. All of the previous deceit that was orchestrated only moments earlier in Genesis 17:1-9 to allude to the reader that God established his covenant in Isaac comes to fruition in the last half of this same verse. Genesis 17:19. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And Genesis 17:21. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. It is crystal clear from the damning evidence we have already produced that this covenant which was established with Abraham is to be clearly renewed in Isaac, as the testimony of other Bibles authenticate. International Standard Version. But God replied, no, but your wife Sarah will give birth to your son, and you are to name him Isaac. I'll confirm my covenant with him as an eternal covenant for his descendants. Holman Christian Standard Bible. But God said, no, your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will name him Isaac. I will confirm my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his future offspring. Jubilee Bible 2000. And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will confirm my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. After seriously exposing the false ages of both Abraham and Ishmael in Genesis 17 verse 24, the priceless question that begs an answer is, how old was Ishmael when Isaac was born? It is not till we get to the true gospel of Christ that we get the true answer from Jesus himself in chapter 44, Barnabas. How is Isaac first born if when Isaac was born, Ishmael was 7 years old? Having already acquired the golden clue that Ishmael will have more than one brother from the truth of the word of God that the angel Gabriel passed on to Hagar in Genesis 12 verse 12, and he will live in hostility towards all his brothers, it became obvious that one had to follow the calculation of the text of Genesis 17. If we add 7 years from where Abraham was 86 years old, when he and the newborn first son Ishmael were circumcised on the same day, we arrive, my dear brothers and sisters, at the forbidden knowledge that Abraham was 93 years of age when Isaac, his second son, was born. What is clearly evident from the above ages of Abraham when both Ishmael and Isaac were born, and from the prophecy of a third son in Genesis 17 verse 17, where Abraham proclaims he will be 100 years old of age at the time of birth, is the 7-year gap, the number 7 that is blessed by God. Having arrived at this unprecedented knowledge, the priceless question that now begs an answer to, my dear brothers and sisters, is, who is this mysterious third son that is promised to Abraham and Sarah at the ripe old age of 99, who clearly belongs in the text of Genesis 18, but is cunningly hidden in the next text of Genesis 17 verse 17. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? The answer to all of the above begins to slowly emerge in the next heading of the very next chapter of Genesis 18. A son is promised to Abraham. It is imperative that one clearly understands that the promise of the son in Genesis 18 is completely separate to the promise of the son in Genesis 17, whom we all know was Isaac. Genesis 18 verses 1 and 2. The Lord appeared to Abraham at the sacred trees of Mamre. As Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent during the hottest part of the day, he looked up and saw 3 men standing there. As soon as he saw them, he ran out to meet them, bowing down with his face touching the ground. Once again, it is crystal clear that it was Jesus that reappeared with Gabriel to Abraham and not the Lord in the above text. As Jesus proclaimed in the damning testimony of John 8:56. It is the next damning text of Genesis which guides us to the damning and epic truth that Sarah is clearly going to have yet another son, apart from Isaac. Genesis 18 verses 9 to 15. Then they asked him, where is your wife Sarah? She is there in the tent. He answered. One of them said, 9 months from now I will come back and your wife Sarah will have a son. What is of notable interest in the above text is the missing name of this third child that has been left out of the prophecy in a crystal clear attempt to conceal the truth. In complete contrast to the prophecies of Ishmael in Genesis 16 verse 11 and Isaac in Genesis 17 verses 19 and 21. We are offended for God at some of the warped terminology inserted into the following text of Genesis 18 verses 11 and 12 of the Good News translation. Sarah was behind him at the door of the tent listening. Abraham and Sarah were very old, and Sarah had stopped having her monthly periods. So Sarah laughed to herself and said, "Now that I am old and worn out, can I still enjoy sex? And besides, my husband is old too." Then the Lord asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Can I really have a child when I am so old? Is anything too hard for the Lord?' As I said, 9 months from now, I will return and Sarah will have a son." Because Sarah was afraid, she denied it. "I didn't laugh," she said. "Yes, you did," he replied. "You laughed." It is clear from the above text of Genesis 18 verses 13 and 14, the text of Genesis 17 verse 17 has been omitted as clarified only moments earlier. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, "Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? Having arrived at the absolute truth that Abraham and Sarah were indeed promised a third son, as Jesus strongly affirms in the text of Genesis 18 verse 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? As I said, 9 months from now, I will return and Sarah will have a son. The dire question that now presents itself is, what is the name of this mysterious third son, whose name has been maliciously omitted by the false scribes in a clear motive to conceal the truth, who is to ultimately become the younger brother of Ishmael and Isaac, in whom the covenant that was established in Abraham and passed on to both Ishmael and Isaac be renewed in him. It is not till we arrive at the explosive text of Sirach 44 verses 22 and 23 that we confirm our historic claim, despite the malicious omittance of Ishmael's name, Isaac and Jacob. The Lord renewed that covenant with Isaac and then again with Jacob, repeating the promise that Abraham's descendants would be a blessing to the whole human race. The Lord assured Jacob that he would bless him. He gave him the land that would be his, dividing it into 12 parts, one for each of the tribes. It is crystal clear from the opening words of Sirach 44 verse 22 that both Isaac and Jacob are from the same mother. The Lord renewed that covenant with Isaac and then again with Jacob, which is affirmed in the testimony of Surah 11 verse 71. And his wife was standing, and she smiled. Then we gave her good tidings of Isaac, and after Isaac, Jacob.
In order that there be absolutely no mistake, let us take the time to reevaluate the evidence that supports the unprecedented claim that Jacob is the younger brother of Isaac, and clearly not his son, as written in the Torah. It is clear from the damning text of Genesis 16 verse 16 and Genesis 17 verse 23 that Abraham was circumcised at the age of 86, as was Ishmael, who was still a baby at the time. In complete contrast to the planted deceit of Genesis 17 verse 24, where Ishmael was 13, Abraham was 99. Having gained the forbidden knowledge from Jesus himself in chapter 44, Gospel of Barnabas, that Ishmael was 7 years of age when Isaac was born, we come to the concealed truth that Abraham was 93 years of age when Isaac was born to Sarah, and it is the promise of yet another child to Abraham at the ripe old age of 100, and through Sarah once again in the damning text of Genesis 17 verse 17, and Genesis 18, verse 9 to 14, that leads us to the golden clue of a second child to Sarah in Jacob, who is to ultimately become the younger brother of Isaac. All of the above damning truth lays to serious waste once and for all time the deceit of the false Pharisees, scribes, and scholars that has fooled both Jews and Christians till this very day, that Jacob is the son of Isaac.
What is also crystal clear from the first 4 words of Sirach 44 verse 22, the Lord renewed that covenant, is the absolute affirmation of the truth we have just presented, that the covenant which the text alludes to is the same covenant that was clearly established in Abraham and indeed renewed in all of Ishmael, Isaac, and Jacob. It is clear that God's plan was to divide the earth into 4 parts. Each of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, and Jacob was given land that would be theirs, dividing it into 12 parts, one for each of the tribes.
The above revelation is further consolidated in a testimony of Surah 21, verses 72 and 73. And we gave him Isaac and Jacob in addition, and all of them we made righteous. And we made them leaders guiding by our command. And we inspired to them the doing of good deeds, establishment of prayer, and giving of zakah. And they were worshippers of us.
It is from this advent that we come to fully understand the true meaning of the term used throughout our scriptures, despite the malicious omittance of Ishmael's name in most verses by the false scribes, as Jesus attested to in Matthew 22:32. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And Muhammad, in Surah 2, 136 and 384, say, O believers, we have believed in Allah and what has been revealed to us, and what has been revealed to Abraham and Ishmael and Isaac and Jacob and the descendants, and what was given to Moses and Jesus, and what was given to the prophets from their Lord. We make no distinction between any of them, and we are Muslims in submission to Him.
It is no coincidence that Abraham and his family form a vital part of the Islamic daily prayer, as can be ascertained from the following proclamation. O Allah, pray on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, just as you prayed on Abraham and the family of Abraham. And send blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, just as you sent blessings on Abraham and upon the family of Abraham. Verily, you are full of praise and majesty.
O Allah, send blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, just as you sent blessings on Abraham and upon the family of Abraham. Verily, you are full of praise and majesty. All of the above truth we have exposed is in complete contrast to the deceit planted in Genesis 25, verses 24 to 26. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them.